Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 We continue in the fourth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 1, entitled Genealogical Table of the Daughters of Manu, with text number 25. Kripavalokena Hasat Varaneno Palam Vidhan Tadrochisha Pradhyate Nimilya Munir Akshini Kripavalokena Hasat Varaneno Palam Vidhan Tadrochisha Pratihate Nimilya Munir Akshini Kripavalokena Hasat Vadaneno Palam Vidhan Tadrochisha Pratihate Nimilya Munir Akshini Kripavalokena Hasat
Vadaneno Palam
Vidhan Tadrochisha Pratihate
Nimilya Munir Akshini
Kripavalokena Hasat Vadaneno Palam Vidhan Tadrochisha Pratihate Nimilya Munir Akshini Kripavalokena Hasat Vadaneno Palam Vidhan Tadrochisha Pratihate Nimilya Munir Akshini
Kripavalokena glancing with mercy Hasat smiling Vadanena with faces Upalambitan appearing very much satisfied Tat there Rochisha by declaring effulgence Pratyate being dazzled Nimilya closing Munihi the sage Akshini his eyes. Translation and purport best divine grace Prabhupada ki jai. Atri Muni was greatly pleased to see that the three devas were gracious towards him. His eyes were dazzled by the effulgence of their bodies, and therefore he closed his eyes for the time being. Purport. Since the deities were smiling, he could understand that they were pleased with him. Their glaring bodily effulgence was intolerable to his eyes, so he closed them for the time being. We continue with verse 26 and 7. Chitastat pravanam yukyan astavitsamatanjali shlakshanya suktaya vacha sarvarokakarya saha Atir vacha Vishvodbhavastila yesho vibhajamanai Maya gunayanu yugam virgita deha Te brahma vishnu kirisha pranatosmi ahamyas Te pyaka eva bhavatam ayaho pahutaha But since his heart was already attached by the deities, Somehow or other he gathered his senses, and with folded hands and sweet words he began to offer prayers to the predominating deities of the universe. The great sage Atri said, O Lord Brahma, Lord Vishnu, and Lord Shiva, you have divided yourself into three bodies by accepting the three modes of material nature, as you do in every millennium for the creation, maintenance, and dissolution of the cosmic manifestation. I offer my respectful obeisances unto all of you and beg to inquire whom of you three I have called by my prayer. Purport. Atri Rishi called for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Jagat Ishvara, the Lord of the universe. The Lord must exist before the creation, otherwise how could he be its Lord? If someone constructs a big building, this indicates that he must have existed before the building was constructed. Therefore, the Supreme Lord, the Creator of the universe, must be transcendental to the material modes of nature. But it is known that Vishnu takes charge of the mode of goodness, Brahma takes charge of the mode of passion, and Lord Shiva takes charge of the mode of ignorance. Therefore Atri Muni said, that Jagat Ishvara, the Lord of the universe, must be one of you. But since three of you have appeared, I cannot recognize whom I have called. You are also kind. Please let me know who is actually Jagat Ishvara, the Lord of the universe. In fact, Atri Rishi was doubtful about the constitutional position of the Supreme Lord Vishnu, but he was quite certain that the Lord of the universe cannot be one of the creatures created by Maya. His very inquiry about whom he had called indicates that he was in doubt about the constitutional position of the Lord. Therefore he prayed to all three, kindly let me know who is the transcendental Lord of the universe. He was certain, of course, that not all of them could be the Lord, but the Lord of the universe was one of the three. Om Gyanatimirandasya Ganandana Shalakaya Chakshuram Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Garamayam Narati Swavarantikam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vagishayasya Vadane, Lakshmiryasya Chabakshasi, Yasya Hridaye Samvit, Tam Narasimham Maham Bhaje, Pragada Hridayaradam, Bhaktavidya Vidaram, Sharatindurjam Vande, Parindra Vandanam Harim. So you heard the last few days about the story of Atri Muni and his wife Anasuya so far, and the reason why it is now the topic is that Vidura inquired about this incident. He was inquiring why or how it come that the three Murtis, Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva, took birth in the home of Atri Muni and Anasuya, the wife of Atri Muni. We know that Anasuya is one of the daughters of Kardama Muni, who is like the husband of Devahuti. Devahuti is the daughter of Swayambhuva Manu. And so like in this chapter, this whole genealogical table is described as the descendancy of all his personalities outlined. So he comes, or like the deities somehow or other decided to take birth in this line or dynasty. I didn't find anything where Atri Muni is descending from. He was just now mentioned in one of the rishis where Kardama Muni gave one of his wives to. And now here the situation is that both of them, Atri Muni and Anasuya, had been desiring for a child, and he particular, Atri Muni, wanted a child which is as good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So at the same time it is mentioned he didn't really know who is that Supreme Personality of Godhead, or like at least his knowledge of the names of the Lord had been insufficient. Although the name Jagat Ishvara is mentioned also in previous verses, we might wonder, yeah, but what is the big difference between Jagannath and Jagat Ishvara? Like, don't we have automatically some conception of the Lord when you have a name? And there might be slight differences. I'm not so conversant with the Sanskrit, but of course there are titles and like kind of categories, and then there are particular names that indicate more of the personality of a person. Sometimes we hear Srila Prabhupada also discussing with Christian representatives about the names of the Lord, and they say we can call God Lord, and then he says, but that's not a name. Like as you go to the king and say king, it's not his name, it's his title, his position. So saying just Lord, it's not a name in that sense. So perhaps similar we can understand Atri Muni had an idea, there is a Supreme Lord, an Ishvara of the universe, but he didn't know more about like who is it, as becomes obvious within this statement when the three deities appeared in front of him, Vishnu, Brahma and Shiva, and he couldn't assert who is now the Supreme Lord. And this is interesting because he is a sage, and we would assume that he has knowledge about that, since like, for example, his wife, Anasuya, the daughter of Kardama Muni, who is a descendant also of Prajapati Brahma, I guess, or Kardama Muni, it's coming from Brahma directly. I'm not so sure. Anyway, but the thing is, we speak here of creatures or living beings on a very high platform of existence with a high level of God consciousness, and it's a bit puzzling perhaps to us to see that there's one rishi or a great sage that has a lack of knowledge really of who is the Supreme Lord. At the same time, there is some theistic concept in his mind that he knows there's a Jagat Ishvara. And what he did is, in the previous verses, we can see he performed some severe austerity. He went with his wife to a particular place. It says, in the mountain valley flows a river named Nirvindya. On the bank of the river are many Ashoka trees and other plants full of Palasha flowers, and there's always a sweet sound of water flowing from a waterfall. The husband of wife reached that beautiful place. There the great sage concentrated his mind by the yogic breathing exercises, and thereby controlling all attachment. He remained standing on one leg only, eating nothing but air, and stood there on one leg for 100 years. He was thinking, may the Lord of the universe, of whom I have taken shelter, kindly be pleased to offer me a son exactly like him. So here also what puzzled me a bit is, well, what exactly was his desire? What did he think of when he says, I want a son exactly like the Supreme Lord, if at the same time he doesn't even know who is that Supreme Lord, right? If I don't know like who someone is, how can I wish someone exactly like that person? I assume we must think of, he has some faith or some belief, the Supreme Person is the greatest and the most glorious and etc. And like this I want a son. But it's a bit, as I said, it remains a bit puzzling about how his desire could be there, like how could he be at the same time having this lack of knowledge. We might have another story in mind from the Srimad Bhagavatam, where also one great personality desired exactly that. He said, I want a son as good as the Supreme Lord, or like as the Supreme Lord. What did he say? Yeah, a son exactly like him. And this is King Nabi in the 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And he asked the Brahmins that were with him to perform a sacrifice so that they could invoke Lord Vishnu in the arena, sacrificial arena. So ultimately with the aim, I need a son, but a son exactly like the Supreme Lord. And King Nabi and his wife Meru are the parents of Rishabdev. And so then the Brahmanas successfully performed the yajna, and Lord Vishnu himself appeared personally. First the Brahmanas were a bit ashamed to say yes, so we invoked you because King Nabi wants a son, because they considered it a material desire. And this is also mentioned for Atri Muni. They say, well, Prabhupada says in the purport, Atri Muni rather has a material desire. He cannot be counted as a pure devotee, since he doesn't have knowledge of the Supreme Lord, and he wishes rather a son, but with the addition, he should be like Supreme Lord. So at the same time, like if you compare it to King Nabi, he also wished that. At the same time, he's considered a pure devotee. So the same desire, but the level of knowledge, understanding was higher. So and then when Vishnu appeared in the arena of King Navi, and he expressed that he was pleased with the sacrifice and also with the king, he said, there is not no son like me or someone exactly like me. Either it's me or someone else, not exactly like me. He said, he's one without the second. So he said, therefore I will appear personally, in my partial expansion, in your wife's womb, Meridev. So then he appeared as Rishabdev. And it turned out that the apparent material desire, though it's anyway strange to speak of material desire if one desires the Supreme Personality of Godhead as one's son. So, turned out to be actually the greatest benediction that King Navi could give to his people, because he desired that his whole country or whatever he reigned over becomes Krishna conscious. And he wanted the best. So ultimately he took care that in his own line the Lord appeared as Rishabdev and became the perfect king that made the whole world Krishna conscious. So his desire was actually the most intelligent desire to attain the Supreme Lord. And I would like to pick up on that, what also is happening here with Atri Muni, besides that he did not have full knowledge who is the Supreme Lord, at the same time he had a desire to get a son like him. And this is also relevant for us in our spiritual life. I like to bring this topic up a lot, to have spiritual desires or desires related strongly to Krishna in our lives. So we might not be anyway in a position to desire, like, please Krishna, like appear as my son in my family. It might be a bit assumptuous to think that he will come. At the same time, it's important to look in our hearts and to see what are our spiritual inclinations and desires connected to the Lord. For example, in a way, how would I like to serve the Lord, or what about the Lord would I like to remember, or like ultimately my spiritual aim, my development, to have these desires in heart and invest in them. Because here's what Atri Muni did, like for his desire to receive a son, exactly like the Supreme Lord, he performed severe austerities. And the description is that some blazing fire came out of his head by virtue of his breathing exercise, and that fire was seen by the three principal deities of the three worlds. So we can also see, like, through this endeavor, which brought an interesting fruit. It's like some intense, some blazing fire came out of his head. So because it got so intense, it's like when we see different descriptions of those personalities who perform this mystic yoga process, what happens is like they intensify or like collect all this mental and energy, which is in itself actually extremely intense. And then they become very powerful, like for example, Dhruva Maharaj stood also on one leg. This is kind of a common exercise, then on one leg. And then it became so heavy and so intense that the whole universe fell out of balance. The demigods felt disturbed, like they couldn't breathe, because he somehow or other disturbed it by his strong penance. And then Brahma appears, or like Vishnu himself appears to say, okay, I noticed, what do you desire? So the principle is attract the attention of Krishna by some yajna, or sacrifice. That's what we also want. We want to attract the attention of Krishna. As Srila Prabhupada pointed out, like that we should not want to see Krishna, but we should endeavor like that Krishna wants to see us by our efforts in spiritual life. So if we have desire, let's say, for example, my desire might be, I would like to see Krishna. I would like to see the Lord in my heart. Because it's a natural desire, like if I believe he is there, if I strongly believe Krishna is present in everyone's heart as a super soul, might also be normal to desire, may I finally see that form also, right? And then the thing is, okay, I cannot simply ask, I must, how to say, become deserving of that. Yesterday Krishna Prema Rupa spoke in the evening about receiving the love of God or like the mercy of Krishna with a proper vessel. And we said the metaphor was the heart that should be cleansed and properly made, so to speak, that this can happen, that we can receive Krishna's mercy. So similarly, our spiritual activities we should regard as a preparation and an effort to attract Krishna's attention. We say, I do that because I want to get closer to you. Because this is very personal, that's what we're actually doing. We want to be in a personal relationship with the Lord, so let's have also in mind, whatever I do here, Krishna, I do ultimately with a desire. I mean, if you don't have, you don't need to, but it's just that because often we speak about this unmotivated devotional service, and sometimes devotees also hesitate or feel reluctant to think of the the idea to have such a desire of wanting to see Krishna, like, because I shouldn't want anything, I should only want to serve Him. So I suggest maybe we can let this count also as a spiritual desire, and to have this in mind and to see, yes, that's what I want, that gives me drive, and as we also pray, Jagannatha Swami Nayana Patagami Madhava, to me, please be the object of my vision. Of course, external vision is like I have the deity in mind, but also inner vision, please allow me to see you, to perceive you in the world, Jagannatha Swami. So, efforts need to be made, and this is our practice of sadhana bhakti, and we might not be able to stand on one leg for I don't know how long, perform severe austerities till a blazing fire comes out of our head and is being noticed by the demigods. So but he said they noticed that, and then they chose to appear in the home of Atri Muni. And here he had this dilemma in a way that he couldn't assert, who's the Supreme Lord now? And this is in the middle of the story where we are at. And also another thing is, which I find interesting to remark, that these deities appeared and Atri Muni could hardly look at them because they were so effulgent, so blazing, his eyes couldn't tolerate it. And this illustrates also how it is the task of the conditioned soul to first acquire the proper senses for perceiving the Lord. Because the senses, also as an actor of devotion states, are not capable, not eligible to perceive the Supreme Lord. As also even our mind and heart is not capable to enter into pure love of God, for example. The body couldn't tolerate it. It's not fit for that. It would just break. It would not be able to handle. So gradually we work also on our purification and development of spiritual, or redevelopment of our spiritual senses, so that we might be able to perceive the Supreme Lord. And similarly also in the Ishopanishad at the end, after endeavors have been made to cultivate knowledge and to understand what is ignorance, what is knowledge, what is the Ishavasya principle, that the devotee is praying in 2 shlokas, at least 2 or maybe it's 3. Those 2 shlokas he prays that please remove this glaring effulgence of yours so that I might become able to see you. Otherwise, as long as this Brahman is strong effulgence, I can't see anything, it's too dazzling. So please allow your devotee to have your darshan. And this again I find is again comes back to this desire of wanting to see the Lord, which is actually something, a spiritual aspiration I think that is very needed and wanted. Why would we not want to see Krishna? Right? So here in the purport we hear that Atri Rishi was doubtful about the constitutional position of the Supreme Lord Vishnu, but he was quite certain that the Lord of the Universe cannot be one of the creatures created by Maya. His very inquiry about whom he had called indicates that he was in doubt about the constitutional position of the Lord. Therefore he prayed to all 3, kindly let me know who is the transcendental Lord of the universe. He was certain, of course, that not all of them could be the Lord, but the Lord of the universe was one of the 3. We also find in the Bhagavatam Sindhu, when the different gradations of rasa are described, and it comes from Shantaras to Dasiras, etc., that actually before Shantaras there are levels of self-realization, might be Brahman realization, that like some distinctions are made. And we can see here also that Atri Rishi apparently was on a rather low level of realization, compared to us still very high, but compared to other devotees mentioned in the Bhagavatam, rather low, because he couldn't acknowledge who is the Supreme Lord. At the same time, he had an understanding of Atma Tattva, of the spiritual self, of Brahman for sure, otherwise he would not be able to even wish for that. And there's mentioned that then there's levels or gradations of realization by whatever, depending on what process one adopts. And here the mystic yoga process is again in the center, which is rather aiming at, first of all, impersonal understanding, or like provides even only that. And if the person is more capable, one can attain also knowledge of the rather personal Paramatma, although sometimes Srila Prabhupada refers also to the Paramatma as the impersonal manifestation of the Lord in the material world. And my understanding is, he says that because Paramatma is in a sense a bit of a mechanical function. He has a particular role connected only to the material world in its material nature. And its material nature is impersonal energy, so this kind of relates to Paramatma being only more or less also in this impersonal realm. At the same time, the Paramatma is a Vishnu feature which can also manifest different aspects of Vishnu or Tattvas based on the devotion of the person. And it's also mentioned that whatever deity you worship with your heart, your Ishtadev, gradually this particular form will manifest in your heart and perhaps you get darshan. You see this famous picture of Hanuman when he opens his chest, and then in the heart you see Sita and Ram. So soon, then probably this will be revealed who is the Supreme Lord of the universe. I will not go there now, let how the story unfolds. This is up to the next speaker. Yeah, actually so far for this, that's what I got to say on that. I think there was something on my mind, perhaps it comes back. Are there so far from your side questions or comments?
Should we take the microphone?
Oh yeah, okay. We have to switch it on.
That was my question.
As you mentioned that in the Upanishad there is stated that the devotee will praise that
The Lord, please may lift this Brahman fortune so we can really see him. And I was thinking, like, this process that we follow, will it lead one point to this that we actually see the Brahman effulgence also, or is it like sometimes I feel like bhakti is the high process and it leads directly to Krishna, but like how is this? Is there like an explanation how is step by step? Because sometimes it even means that like if you pray to Krishna you already are on the Brahman realization, but I never saw such an effulgence or something, you know. Can you explain maybe something about this?
Yes, thank you. That's a very relevant question that I dealt with also since quite a few years, and I asked different also senior devotees, Vaishnavas, Swamis, preachers about it. And it's for me in a sense still an ongoing discussion, since on one side my understanding is that there is a gradual process of realization, which is also outlined in the Bhagavad Gita itself. And we usually like to quote this verse from 54. Brahma Bhuta Prasanatmana Sochatina Kamshati Samasarveshu Bhuteshu Mad Bhaktim Labhate Brahm. And there Brahma Bhuta is mentioned as the level of transcendence. It means when one is on the platform, where one is Prasanna Atma, means the self is completely free or purified from the three modes of nature. This is Prasanna Atma. And then Brahma Bhuta happens, this blissful state of being connected to the Brahman nature of the self. Which doesn't necessarily mean that one has an impersonal concept, one is simply connected to the transcendental nature of the self. And then there's na sochati, na kankshati, there's no hankerings, no lamentation. Samasavesha bhuteshu, one can have this truly equal vision that all living entities are also Brahman, that we're not different bodies based on the modes. This is duality, this is this body, this is that body, and therefore different identity, but one sees the unity in spiritual nature. And then it said, Mat Bhaktim Navate Param. From there, one attains bhakti or pure devotional service. And from this we might understand that actually the Brahman realization, and this doesn't speak about the process, how we attain it, just the result. Brahman realization is the basis for bhakti. And Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, one cannot serve the Supreme without being first one with the Supreme. And of course we know he doesn't mean that we merge with Krishna, but points out that we have to be on this level of transcendence to acknowledge and understand the transcendental nature of Krishna, and that we can relate to Krishna on a transcendental platform. Because as long as on a material platform we do some devotional service or bhakti in practice, and proportionately to how purified we are, our bhakti increases, but the true devotional service in its essential way happens only on the transcendental platform. Jagannath Baladev Subhadra ki jai. Gauranga ki jai. We though don't have to perform mystic yoga first to come to this Brahma platform. Our process, we already have Krishna as a Supreme Personality in our center, meditate on it and follow this process. And there are different devotees also responded differently, and it doesn't necessarily mean you have to go through all the stages one by one. Depending how Krishna also reveals things to you, you can also, if let's say Krishna would choose to reveal himself, you would automatically have the realization of the other two aspects also, because he's the Supreme Lord and then shows everything. At the same time, it's also likely that first you, in order to acknowledge and see Krishna, you purify yourself sufficiently to have transcendental vision. And then depending on your mood and on your rasa that develops, then also Krishna might choose to appear, because he doesn't easily choose to appear, obviously. It has quite some effort to do so. But it's my understanding that there is a hierarchy of realization which starts with Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan. At the same time, Krishna can provide you with these realizations independently of what path you choose. But as we can see, even we have the statement, yes, someone who worships Krishna automatically has this realization. We can look in our lives, it doesn't apply to us that we have it. You cannot pretend, yes, I have this already. Where is it? How does it manifest? I don't see with Brahman vision, transcendental vision. So one thing is the philosophical statement to understand the process of bhakti is supreme and includes all levels of realization. At the same time, it's obvious, like it's common sense to understand, but because thinking to have it is a very different thing than to factually have it. Cannot think I'm Krishna conscious and I must be Krishna conscious. Like that. Any other comments, questions?
I just asked the same question to Nanda Kumar Prabhu in another class about Paramatma, and the verse 9.4 in Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says, all living entities are in me, but I am not in them. How to understand that? Maybe you have some.
All living entities are in me, but I am not in them. Can I have a Bhagavad Gita 9.4 there from the English one? It's good to see what Prabhupada says in purpose, because
But he doesn't really address it, that's the point. He addresses it like, kind of.
Maybe it would be good to see what the other church say in this regard. One understanding one could apply here is that Krishna speaks of his different features, because of course are the living entities in him. There's also the meaning of Narayan, that he is also the resting place, the shelter of living entities with his personal body, but also his functions is him. So the living entities can anyway not exist outside of him. So naturally, Tattva means clear, ontologically they exist in him. At the same time, he exists also as the source of them separately. He might enter their hearts and exist with them, but like at the same time we find statements that in the core of the self is the actual self is for every jiva is Krishna. So let's see what he says here. I am not in them. I guess that's the question. What does it mean when he says, but I am not in them? Now by me, in my unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. All beings are in me, but I am not in them. Maya tatam vidam sarvam jagat avyaktamurtina matstani sarva bhutani nachaham te savastitam. Here it is said that although he is all-pervading, everywhere present, he is not conceivable by the material senses. This is indicated here by the word avyaktamurtina. But actually, although we cannot see him, everything is resting in him. As we have discussed in the 7th chapter, the entirety of cosmic manifestation is only a combination of his two different energies, the superior spiritual energy and the inferior material energy. Just as the sunshine is spread all over the universe, the energy of the Lord is spread all over the creation, and everything is resting in that energy. So as we can understand, we mentioned before, like he's also the explanation of the name Vasudeva is saying that everything exists within him, and he also exists in everything, but depending how he's represented. He is existing impersonally also within everything. As if he says in my functions, I pervade everything, he's also present in an impersonal feature, but he's not personally there.
But he is in a way also.
Yes, because there's nothing outside of Krishna, and also his effulgence is intrinsically with him connected. It doesn't exist separately, and is also one and different at the same time from him.
Sridhara Swami's commentary on this is uses the word supported. So all living entities find their support in me, but I am not supported in them.
Okay, we could also hear the constitutional position to say who is the maintainer and the maintained, and that there's the ontological difference outlined that jivas are the maintained ones, and Krishna is the maintainer. And there's outlining of the difference of the relationship in terms of who depends on whom. Here, Srila Prabhupada, let's read further. Yet one should not conclude that because he is spread all over, he has lost his personal existence. To refute such an argument, the Lord says, I am everywhere and everything is in me, but still I am aloof. For example, a king heads a government which is but a manifestation of the king's energy. The different governmental departments are nothing but the energies of the king, and each department is resting on the king's power. But still one cannot expect the king to be present in every department personally. That is a crude example. So actually metaphorically, Srila Prabhupada makes a point how he's indirectly represented only in the jivas, but not directly. So this king and government, one could consider the government an expansion of the king, Although the king doesn't have to be present in every department, still at the same time he is present there. It's the king's, it's under the king's rule, like that.
May I share a few thoughts about this question? So the part where Krishna says that we are part of him is quite clear. Like we are in him, so we are whole. Our whole personality is in him because we are part of him. But he says that he is not in us, so that means he's not fully in us. Like partially, one part of him is in us. So this would be a very dry logical approach to this question, because if Krishna would be in us, like the opposite of what he's saying, then it would mean that he's fully in us, but this is obviously not true. So just like part, like Paramatma is just like you mentioned in the lecture, it's just one aspect of Krishna. It's like more impersonal aspect, and so in this way he makes clear that we are like part of him, but he is not a part of us.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I'm not only in them.
Yeah.
Like this.
Yeah,
So
because just if you think of the opposite, if Krishna would say that he is in us, then it would mean he's fully in us, so nowhere else.
God also.
Yeah.
Here's something like this also. Everything is resting on my energy, but I'm not them. The Mayavadi philosophers, they are mistaking that when everything is expanded on God's energy, then why there is a separate God? This is material conception. God is always separate from his energy. That is distinctly said here. Maya Advam Idam Sarvam. Everything is emanation of God's energy, but still God is not there. If you worship the energy of God, that is not God worshipping. Indirectly it is, but directly it is not. That is explained by Bhagavad Gita.
What comes to my mind is also when he says, I'm not in them, is he relating to the very pure Atma and so to say the inner core of the Atma, or is he relating to the embodied state of the Atma if he's within there, you know? So I was always thinking now, like he's speaking of the Jiva, pure Jiva, and is he within the pure Jiva in its core? And in a way, if you look at it, I mean, it remains with speculation, but anyway, it's okay. Some stuff we have to contemplate and ponder and discuss till we come to the right conclusion or find the right sources. That the pure devotee said also his life and soul, maybe it's a bit metaphorical saying, but it's Krishna. They practically, the self that we experience as us is one thing, but then actually the essential self is also Krishna, because we are his expansions and kind of saying, this is also what the devotee in the Ishopanishad prays. When he says, remove this effulgence, show yourself to the pure devotee, and you are like brilliant like the sun, and of the same nature like me. So the devotee in Ishopanishad is identifying you and I are of same nature. Though he's different from the quantity part, but pointing out we are related in essence and substance, so we are same. So I'm actually part of you, and of course I emanate from you, but I'm alike, like you. So therefore I can identify myself with you, not necessarily impersonally, but simply, let's call it ontologically as what we are essentially. But yeah, it remains a good question perhaps to have this question around. Mm-hmm.
In the heart of pure devotees, he is always present as person also.
It is also said.
These are our exceptions to this what is written in your shloka, you know. When you say Mukunda on the Ram, then Ram is personally there, you have an exchange with him. That means he's there as a person, not only as Paramatma.
Yeah.
Just
Maybe Michael wants to say.
Just one big thing.
I found a place where in the lecture of a Melbourne lecture on Bhagavad Gita.
Can you speak into the mic?
Mike speaking to the
It's a
mic.
Melbourne lecture, Bhagavad Gita, where he says, so Prabhupada explains, so Krishna said that I'm spread all over the universe. So the example is given just like the sunshine. What is the sunshine? The sunshine is illumination, and the heat also, heat and light, sunshine. Now if you go to the sun planet, then what is there? Heat and light. And if you enter into the sun planet and see the person, the supreme person within the sun. So there was, I think, a little bit more like what Lex says, that we have the sunshine. So the sunshine is everywhere, but the person, Krishna,
Yeah.
is somewhere else.
Yeah, it comes to this partial representation, direct or indirect representation. And depending on of course, coming back to the original verse, Atri Muni was a sage on a very different level of, for example, King Navi or like other personalities. So accordingly to his level, he also, Krishna manifests himself more directly or indirectly within their minds and hearts. Like even here, Atri Muni was performing great sacrifices, but since he was not really acknowledged as the Supreme Lord, the three Devas appeared in front of him, and still he had not, his level of consciousness was different than, for example, King Navi, who could fully acknowledge the Supreme Lord. So the manifestation of Krishna within our hearts or consciousness, mind, how we might tell it, depends on our level of devotion and understanding.
I also think actually we know what is meant, but it's just the question, why is it formulated in this way? Why wouldn't he say not only, or explain in the next verse maybe a little more?
Yeah, the next verse is saying, and yet everything that is created does not rest in me. Behold my mystic opulence. Although I am the maintainer of all living entities, and although I am everywhere, I am not a part of this cosmic manifestation. For myself, it's the very source of creation. Yeah, it's a bit, how to say, rätselhaft, when you say anything. Mysterious.
But at the same time, it also shows somehow this Achintya Veda Veda, and which is very nice because then you can understand that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he didn't just make something up, but he has really sourced also Bhagavad Gita, for example, verses like these.
Yeah, we understand that the Bahiranga Shakti is the external, sometimes also said separated energy in the Bhagavad Gita in the 4th chapter, 7th, where he discusses his external energy. It's his energy, at the same time it has a status of being a separate energy, and although he is maintaining it indirectly, still it's his, and at the same time not. So at the same time he is in there and also not, in this direct and indirect terms. Yeah, it's pointed out here that my understanding is also one reason why this is mentioned is that we don't get misunderstandings of how Krishna being either material or some subtle material nature, but that he's aloof of that material world. Alright, okay, thank you very much. Granta Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai.
Keshava ki jai.